Well, I've been a little bit out of touch the last few days and missed a day. So uh, I had enough fun with my family to not feel too bad about it. And since there's like one or two views per time, you know, that's just the way it goes. We're in First Timothy chapter 5, verse 22 and following. Basically, we're going to talk a little bit more about the last part of verse 22. Do not be hasty in the laying on of hands, and do not share the sins of others. Keep yourself pure. How in the world do you keep yourself pure? In a world that is built on the concept that the best way to make money and achieve lasting success is to not bother with being pure. There are even times within the Christian community where purity is not that big a deal. Dietrich Bonhoeffer called this cheap grace, where we depend on grace to make up for any of the missteps or flaws or wanderings but it's okay. So just go ahead, enjoy. Well, no. Grace is our power to keep ourselves pure. If grace is what the New Testament indicates that it is absolutely too good to be true. It means when grace applies itself, when grace comes in, really bottom line is when we accept and then embrace God's grace, He covers us with forgiveness, and then He empowers us to live and keep ourselves pure. Nobody's got such a strong sense of self-discipline that they'll be able to handle this on their own. No problem. No, that's not how it works. Your self-control has to be engaged in partnership with God's grace. Keep yourself pure. If I get this right, and I think I'm close at least here, keeping myself pure has to do with me deciding, first of all, deciding that purity is an actual goal in my life. Is it the only goal? No, but it is a legitimate and outstanding goal for me. If I don't decide that, then I have to decide about everything as it comes up, one case at a time. Well, that puts me in a bad spot. But if I decide ahead of time that purity is one of my most outstanding goals, it sets me up to choose strategy and take measures to keep myself pure. I guess what I'm saying is, I look around, I look at my own life, you just don't have to spend very many lengthy moments looking at the world and realize this is not my grandpa's world anymore. This is not even my daddy's world anymore, because both of their generations believed that purity was a necessary and important part of the way society can thrive. We don't believe that anymore. Now, you might be offended by me telling you that you don't believe that anymore, but you need to take a strong look at your own life. And I want you to be observational. I'm not trying to be judgmental on this. I'm just making some observations, so you have to trust me on that. First thing I would say to be observational about your own life is you need to look at a few things. First of all, look at your calendar Really? For purity? Yeah. Your calendar is basically a journal of how you've spent your time, what you put into your life by intention, or what you permitted into your life by choice. Are there things there that I'm having a horrible time with my allergies? Are there things in your calendar that kind of point in the direction of purity is not an issue? Now, there are some things that not everything is not an issue of purity, but there are things that are purity issues. And look at your calendar and see if you just see what's there observationally. Second thing is, because that's about how you spend your time. The second thing is, look at your bank account, your online statement, because that tells you how you spend your money. Is there anything in there that leans against or pushes against purity in your life? And a lot of, you can make as much out of this as you want, because I know there are people who will, and the reason they will is because they can make a case that, you know what, 90% of what you're spending your money on does not draw you toward greater purity. Because the bottom line on purity is, I want my desires to conform with God's design. That's the bottom line on purity. And so much of what I spend my time and money on are really about me getting what I want. And if it happens to coincidentally coincide with or fit within God's design, then I'm a happy camper. If it doesn't fit, I don't worry about it. I just go for what I want. This, in my opinion, explains the status quo, which is the mess we're in as a people. Okay, keep yourself pure. It will not happen accidentally. It requires intention and effort. And then he goes on in verse 23. I grew up in a teetotaling household. I mean teetotaling. My mother was the adult child of two alcoholic parents and was deeply, deeply, deeply scarred by her childhood and adolescent memories of two drunk parents. So I probably talked about this before, but when my brothers and I used to watch baseball on Saturday afternoon, and Falstaff and Lone Star were the two big advertisers, we felt like we needed to look away from the TV when a beer commercial came on, because my mom had deep, 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 as I've said, emotional scars. Well, reading the idea that Paul says, stop drinking only water and use a little wine because of your stomach and your frequent illnesses. Because I grew up in this teetotaling home, and our religious tradition was absolutely teetotaling. As a matter of fact, when I was in junior high, you got to be really old, and it will require some specific experience to have ever encountered the Ladies Temperance Union, LTL. It wasn't Union, League. Ladies Temperance League, who their mission in life was to keep young people from getting into alcohol, which I don't think that's a bad motive. But they kind of went about it in a ineffective way. The only reason I was forced to go. Okay, so I guess I've got some scars there. But Paul says, stop drinking only water and use a little wine because of your stomach and your frequent illnesses. Now, in the church I grew up in, that church basically defended itself against all kinds of things, and alcohol was one of them. Wine, well, their view was, well, that can't be actual fermented alcoholic wine. That's got to be like grape juice. Well, sorry, doesn't work, because the word here is alcoholic wine. But before the gate gets kicked all the way open, so you just drink as much of whatever you want, stop drinking wine, use water, and use a little wine. Little wine. Okay. How much is a little? Well, it's less than a lot. It's way less than a lot. Is that a sip? Is that a glass? What is that? Well, I can tell you, it's not a bottle. The idea here needs to be set in its cultural context. You do realize that in the Greco-Roman world in which Paul and Timothy lived, there were very few effective medical treatments for much of anything. Paul indicates that Timothy's having a stomach issue and frequent illnesses. We don't know what the specific illnesses are. We don't know what his stomach illness and issues amounted to. We just know they got in the way. And the most reliable intervention medically at that point in time was a little wine. So now, does this give me permission to say yes to a glass of wine? Well, yes and no. If I need this as a means of permission, and I probably misunderstood a whole lot of other things, right? Okay. But on the other hand, apparently, a little wine is not a huge hindrance to God's design and work in the world. As a matter of fact, it could help promote his work when Timothy is more healthy. A little wine. We live in an alcoholic society. 1/3 of the people you go to church with are problem drinkers. You don't believe me, but if you ever had time and interest, you could go do some specific research, and the national averages is 30% of the people in our country are problem drinkers. That's not even including other kinds of self-medication. In that world, there may be a reason. There may be a good reason for certain individuals to be teetotalers, where they don't do wine. They don't do other alcoholic beverages. But I'm not sure that this is the scripture that says, enjoy. Go for it. All right. I got less than a minute left, so I'm going to wrap up and say, okay, if the primary application of the two verses that I've pointed us to today goes back to that phrase, keep yourself pure. If we want to keep ourselves pure in our culture, it's going to apply into our consumption of alcoholic beverages. Does it mean you may not have any? You must not? I don't get that. But I do get the idea that you got to be careful. You must be careful. A little wine. You know, don't leave that word little out of it. Okay. Keep yourselves pure. I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.